Because 1972 was really the first election in which Republicans, I believe, did very well, or perhaps even carried Macomb County. That really was sort of the beginning of the change in Macomb County, was it not?
That's a good point. It's true. But as Frank has said on several occasions, especially when he came to the portrait hanging and when I left the Supreme Court, he said that it was a very civil relationship between the two of us, and we got along very well. We always have. I've attended functions of his, and he's attended a function of mine. And I told him then, I said, if I live long enough, I want to be able to come to your retirement party, but I'm not sure that I ever will because you are the eternal general.
Right. And once again, campaigns, even in 1972, were very different than the campaigns we see today.
They seem to be. Yeah, you know, we made the points against each other, but we weren't nasty about them.
You won big in 1972 against Kelly, and Richard Nixon also won big in 1972. But there were these rumblings about Watergate. What did you think about first reports on Watergate?
Well, I didn't, you know, I guess I hoped as much as thought that it wasn't a serious matter as far as the White House was concerned. We were assured over and over again that the White House had nothing to do with this, or the Republican committee or anything of that kind. And obviously over a period of time it came to be otherwise. I remember very well, and Marge was there, we went to a leadership meeting during the '72 campaign when President Nixon stood up and assured all of us, you know, not to worry during this campaign, to go out and campaign hard because Watergate is never going to touch our White House. There's nothing there that's going to affect us. That was a very telling thing as far as Marge and I were concerned when we later were to learn that that wasn't the truth.
Mm-hmm. In the fall of '73, just when Watergate was beginning to gather some momentum, Spiro Agnew resigned as vice president, and President Nixon had the responsibility of selecting a new vice president by appointment. What role did you play, if any, in the eventual selection by Nixon of Gerald Ford?
I remember that there was a lot of talk of Connally, and I wrote President Nixon a letter and said that I thought that would be a big mistake if he appointed Connally. Connally had changed parties and there was a lot of dissension. He needed somebody who could win the confirmation vote of both houses of Congress under that the 25th Amendment, and that he needed somebody like Hugh Scott or Jerry Ford. And I was really thinking of Jerry Ford, even though I mentioned Scott's name. Hugh Scott would have been too old at that time to have appointed. And I don't know how much, you know, that was one more voice for Jerry Ford, because there were a lot of people throughout the Congress that were supporting, and Democrats as well as Republicans, who were supporting Jerry Ford for that appointment.
Mm-hmm. When the appointment was finally made by President Nixon, did you have any thought at that time that, in fact, Richard Nixon was choosing his own successor?
Well, not really, you know.
Right.
I was, you always realize that that's a possibility when you select a vice president.
Of course, you were a member of the Congress for 22 years and never served in the majority, so it's a wonder in many ways that you had any positive legislative accomplishments. But certainly one of those in your first term was the repeal of the auto excise tax. What would you tell us about that and any other legislative victories?
Well, there was for a long period of time a 7% excise tax levied against automobiles, and Chuck Chamberlain and I became very interested in that because we saw it as a discriminatory situation as far as the industry that was the major source of jobs as far as Michigan was concerned. And between him on the House and me on the Senate, we launched quite an effort and got a lot of support and eventually got that change made in the tax laws, and at that time it was very helpful in my '72 campaign as well.
Mm-hmm, sure. What about in the criminal law area? As I recall, you were fairly active in seeking legislation regarding the exclusionary rule and perhaps some other reforms in reaction to some of the Warren Court decisions.
Well, I have always made speeches against the exclusionary rule. You know, no other country has it. Canada or England doesn't use it. But we didn't get anywhere. So it was one of those things you talked about a lot, and it's still a problem as far as the criminal situation is concerned now.
Right. Then in 1974, in the summer, some cataclysmic events began to take place regarding Watergate. Up until that time, particularly because you had been Republican whip in the Senate, you had been a supporter of the president.
Yeah, that, you know, I certainly supported the administration as much as I felt I could, conscientiously. And you also have to keep in mind that way back in 1956, when I ran for Congress the first time, Nixon came into this district and gave a speech for me and supported me. In other elections, he was always there to support me. At one point, he nominated me to be one of the 10 outstanding young men of the nation, which and the JCs took his recommendation and awarded me such a thing as that. And so I owed Nixon a lot politically, and it was very, very tough when I learned in 1974, in August, that the tapes of a conversation in the White House 7 days after Watergate implicated Nixon directly in the cover-up of that situation.
And you are one of the very few people in the Congress, and certainly therefore in the entire country, who were even aware at that moment of those smoking gun tapes.
Because of my leadership position, I was one of the first ones to learn about it. It came indirectly from Alexander Haig, who was the chief of staff. And I had a tough time during that week. I came home on the weekend, and learning that on a Friday, and came home and tried my best to figure out what role I should play. Here I'm a leader,
yes,
and I'm suddenly faced with the fact that Nixon is going to be impeached. He's going to be tried in the Senate, and I knew he was going to be convicted because the votes were so close even before we knew that. And now I felt like I had to vote against him, which was really something a conclusion to come to. So I reluctantly came within myself to the conclusion that the best solution for him and the country would be for him to resign.
And then you chose to write him a letter.
No president in history, of course, had before ever resigned. And I was asking myself, what could I do and what should I do under these circumstances? And I felt that I could play an important role if I could shock him with some reality and make him face up to the fact that he should consider the course of resigning. I worked through the night and came up with a letter on the next day after I learned this information, and wrote to him a letter which was delivered to Camp David, saying that while, of course, a senator couldn't decide in advance how he would vote, I felt it would be appropriate to let him know what I would consider to be grounds for impeachment. And at that time, the Burger Court unanimously had already decided that he had to turn over a group of tapes, including this one, to Judge Sirica and to the House Committee. His counsel had denied doing that. And I wrote and said, I have no doubt that in view of your defiance, that the House is going to vote for articles of impeachment, and there will be a trial in the Senate. And I want you to know that I have no doubt, I said, that the Senate will also subpoena those tapes. And if you defy the Senate and are in contempt of the Senate, I will consider that and grounds for impeachment and will vote accordingly. And I wanted him to know that he was losing me, and that I felt it